right, you can open up to Genesis 37. And Pastor did ask for some special prayer this morning. He's going to be teaching at a seminar with a bunch of people over there that are in the ministry trying to do the work. So he's going to be teaching this morning. He said a couple hours, so I'm not sure exactly what time frame that is there. But he will be doing some teaching today. And there have been some good reports of what's going on over there on Facebook or Facebook Messenger, if you've seen that, any pictures or videos. So a lot going on there as far as our pastor, Pastor Reese, and a couple men that went with him. So it looks really good. Looks like a successful trip, and the Lord's blessing over there. And what we're going to do here this morning in Sunday school is just a continuation of what we're doing in the college and career, and that's looking at just Joseph in the Old Testament. And we're looking at the life of Joseph, just step to step, geographically, from place to place, and then along with those steps, looking at the different types that he fulfilled as far as being, I think, the greatest type in the Old Testament of the coming of Jesus Christ eventually, later on. Any other announcements? We'll go through those during the regular service time. We'll just get right into our lesson and see what we can cover. Nathan walked up to me and asked for a title, and it's like, I didn't really think of a title. I didn't think of anything funny or punny or anything else. So I just said, well, Joseph as a type of Christ. We'll just continue on with that thought. So as I said in Genesis chapter 37, we'll get through a few of these today. And we read these in our class previously, but just as an intro here, for this class combined, chapter 37 in verse 12, and his brethren went to feed their father's flock in Shechem. And Israel said unto Joseph, do not thy brethren feed the flock in Shechem? Come, and I will send thee unto them. And he said to him, here am I. And he said to him, go, I pray thee, see whether it be well with thy brethren, and well with the flocks, and bring me word again. So he sent him out of the vale of Hebron, and he came to Shechem. And so as we're going through these different steps in our class and then covering the types, but just going through these different steps, a lot of the first steps as far as moving from place to place geographically, Joseph was just part of his wacky family as they traveled along from one place to another. Jacob was in charge, and everybody knows the kind of life and the ups and downs that Jacob had in his life. And any young person in church or out in the world or here with Joseph, any younger person, when you're a kid, you're sort of going from place to place at the whim of your parents. And it was the same with Joseph here, of course. And one of the biggest things with Joseph, though, that we can look at, in spite of everything that went on and everywhere he was dragged along and all the shenanigans that his dad and his wife and his other wife and his concubine and his other concubine and all the kids that were from all those wives and concubines, with everything that went on there, he grew up and he didn't have any permanent, lasting scars. He didn't look back and say, well, if my dad had only done this different, then I would be a different man than I am today. Everything that happened to him as a very young boy or as a very young man, he overcame and he just did what he felt he needed to do. He ended up serving the Lord in a more consistent or I don't know if you want to say a better, but in a better way than his dad had. He didn't get involved in as many things as his dad had. Everything he went through, he came out better on the other side, and he didn't look back and use that as a source of blame to excuse himself later. And that was a big thing of just seeing him going from place to place. And as far as where we're at, as far as covering all this, we're up to step 10 as far as moving from place to place. And as far as types, we're up to type 16. And there's just been a lot of really good, I think, a lot of good practical things to look at, comparing what Joseph did and things that we come across still today, and of course looking at the types that he was of the coming Jesus Christ. And one more thing as far as just an introduction or some things that we've covered already, some thoughts. One of the biggest things to me about Joseph's early life, besides just, overcoming and just going on and serving the Lord. Another big lesson is just to take from that situation is that, especially as young people, we look at this family here, or I look at this family, and it's one of the most dysfunctional families in the Bible. And there were some dysfunctional families in the Bible, but this is one of the worst. And me looking at this, as far as a lesson for young people, I think we can look at this and say, yeah, this guy did not have a good family life. This guy did not have a good relationship with his brethren, or even, you want to call it his stepmoms, or whatever you want to call that situation. But the big lesson that you can take from all that is, hey, you know what? I'm a young person, or I'm becoming an adult. Yeah, this is a wacky family, but sometimes I feel like my family's the wackiest one around. I've had, my mom do this, or my dad do this, or I've been in this situation, or I've been, carted from place to place, or this happened, or this hypocrisy, or this inconsistency. One of the biggest lessons I think a young person can take from this whole story is that, okay, yeah, I haven't been in a perfect family situation either, or at least I don't think I have, but what I can determine as a young person is that I'm going to do better than my mom did or my dad did, with God's help. With God's help, I'm going to be a more consistent Christian, or with God's help, I'm not going to get involved in this thing or this sidetrack that hurt our family as we were growing up. So that's a big thing as a young person to determine, yeah, my family wasn't perfect, mom and dad wasn't perfect, which we're not, they're not, but as a young person, you can determine with God's help, I'm just going to give something a little bit better or a little bit more consistent to my kids. So I think that's one of the biggest lessons of looking at all the confusion and everything that went on here. And hopefully as a parent, I've done that to some extent. I think I have with the Lord's help. Hopefully my kids think maybe I have, or at least I've tried, but that ought to be our goal as a younger person and as a parent. Okay, but that brings us down to this. All that brings us to what we would call in our class step 11, and that's in Genesis 37 down in verse 15. So we know the story of the dreams and all the stuff that happened and was leading up to this point, and now we're getting close to the point of where Joseph is actually going to go into Egypt, which is where the big stories come in, or the well-known stories. But here in Genesis chapter 37 down in verse 15, let's see here. And a certain man found him, and behold, he was wandering in the field, and the man asked him, saying, What seekest thou? And he said, I seek my brethren. Tell me, I pray thee, where they feed their flocks. So here is step 11. He's going to be going from Shechem to the city of Dothan, where his brethren were. And part of the last step that we covered, this sort of goes into that, or the last type, I should say. Type number 16 was Joseph obeying his father's will, saying, hey, here am I, Dad, I'll go and do whatever you want me to do, without knowing every detail of his dad, or every detail that his dad would have him do as far as, going to see his brethren, or what he's supposed to take, or how much farther he might have to go. So Joseph, as a type of Christ, agreed to do his father's will, even though he didn't know everything that he would have to do yet. And that was just like Jesus Christ being here on this earth, agreeing to do his father's will, coming down. But there were still things that were veiled even from Jesus Christ as far as his father's will, but here he was to do his father's will. So that's the type of Joseph that we covered there on the last one, of him not knowing every detail, not knowing everything, but he's ready to go obey his father. And here, as far as the step going from one area to another, there's only one reason that Joseph is going now from Shechem to Dothan, and that is just to keep on doing his father's will. So his dad didn't say, yeah, well, you're going to go here to where your brothers are, and if they're not there, then I want you to go here, or just keep following them till you catch up with them. I mean, he didn't say that, and Joseph didn't know that. But again, the only reason he's going further along here is to try to just do what his dad told him to do. Go to his brothers, get a report, come back. And like we mentioned last week, I don't know, here he is in the middle of this field. He's walking around in the middle of the field thinking, well, where did my brothers go? So I don't know if, he had his ear to the ground like the Indians on the railroad tracks. No offense, Mrs. Waters. But an ear to the ground or, putting dust in the wind to see which way the wind was blowing. He's like looking for his brothers. And this certain man comes and says, hey, they went that away. And so that's the way he goes. So he didn't know that at first. And just comparing it to our Christian life, there have been times, or there are times right now, or if there has never been in your life, there are going to be times when you're going to agree with the Lord, which is a good thing to do. You're going to agree with the Lord about something that he wants you to do, or somewhere he wants you to go, or something he wants you to say. So there's going to be times when the Lord has a definite impression on you, that you feel like the Spirit's moving. I mean, this isn't just about, picking out the color of your next new suit or what kind of car you want to buy. I mean, this is something that you really feel the Lord wants you to do. And you agree to do it. There's going to be a time, sometime in the future, if there hasn't been already, where you do what God wants you to do, and then there's this extra step, or 2 steps, or 3 steps that you didn't know that were going to happen. And they might not be easy steps. Sometimes just agreeing with the Lord to do something that he is moving you to do is an easy step. Sometimes it's not so easy. Sometimes it's hard to surrender. I mean, that's why surrender is called surrender, because you're giving up your will. But sometimes there's extra steps you didn't know about, and they're not necessarily going to be easy. But here we have Joseph doing the exact same thing. And I had one verse, I'll just read it for time's sake. You don't even have to turn there. But in Philippians chapter 3, verse 7, this is Paul talking about this exact same thing. And down in chapter 3, verse 7, but what things were gained to me, those I counted loss for Christ. Yea, doubtless, and I count all things but loss for the excellency of the knowledge of Christ Jesus, my Lord, for whom I have suffered the loss of all things, and do count them but dung, that I may win Christ. So Paul didn't lose just a thing or 2 things. He had the loss of all things. Now, all things, that's a lot of stuff. But he counted them all but dung. He didn't care about it. But there were things that happened to Paul later on. He had no idea that they were going to happen to him when he surrendered to Jesus on the Damascus road there. But looking back later, when it all happened, when all those extra steps took place, he was okay with that. So he didn't quit. Paul didn't quit. Joseph didn't quit. He's going on looking for the will of his brother. And we're supposed to do the same thing. It's the same thing with a job or with your marriage. I mean, you get married and everything's awesome, but there's going to be some difficulties eventually later. I mean, whether it's how you roll the toothpaste tube, that your spouse doesn't do it the same way, or there's going to be an illness, or there's going to be some lack of judgment on your spouse that you disagree with. Well, I mean, we don't just quit and look for the next spouse after that type of thing. You stay with that person because for one thing, you love that person. For another thing, you want to be faithful to that person and remain faithful to that person. So you don't just up and quit. You surrendered your will to that person, and you're going to continue on with that person. And it's the same thing with the Lord. So there's going to be things that we come across that are hard after we've surrendered to God. But we're going to be able to look back and say, those things weren't really worth that much anyway, and I'm just glad to be here serving the Lord like he called me to do. So when we say, just like Joseph did, hey, here am I, Dad. What do you want me to do? What's next? When we say, here am I, anything can happen. But if you're with the Lord, it's going to be good in the end, as long as we don't quit. That's what we do. We just go on. And that brings us down to same chapter there, of course, down in verse 17. So here's Joseph. He's looking for his brothers. He finds his brothers. And the man said, they are departed hence, for I heard them say, let us go to Dothan. And Joseph went after his brethren, and found them in Dothan. And so here is when he catches up. And here's when some of the real problems start. Or not even starting, as we'll see, but here's where they commence. Here's where they carry on. And verse 18, and when they saw him afar off, even before he came near unto them, they conspired against him to slay him. So here, type 17, another similarity between Joseph and Jesus Christ coming along later. His own brethren conspire against him. So it's not just something they pop up with on the fly. It's not something that just sort of appeared in their head and they're like, hey, well, there's Joseph, let's kill him. This is something that they conspired about for a while. So they were conspiring, they were planning against him. They had a plan. So they had thought of this before. I mean, we already covered in our class, they hated him. They hated this brother of theirs. They hated him for his special relationship with his dad. They hated him for the dreams that the Lord had given him. They hated the fact that he had a better relationship with the Lord than them. They hated everything about this kid. So they did not want him around, and the thought had come before in their mind, it would just be a lot easier if this guy was gone. They had a plan already, or they had the desire, at least, they had a desire to kill him. They had a plan going on in their head. There's a guy at work, I can't remember if I mentioned this in class before, but there's a guy at work in the city down in Detroit, just one of those larger-than-life guys, just a monster, former sniper Marine, big black guy, he'd come and riding in on his motorcycle with the big handlebars and the music blaring like a movie, 230 pounds of, muscle and sinew, sort of like Dan. But he would come in and sometimes, nice guy, a little intimidating, but he was nice to have working afternoons in the city with you. But nice guy, but he would have some strange ideas now and then. I don't know if it was the Marine thing or what was going on, but he had a plan, and he told this plan to several people about how he could single-handedly take over the federal building in downtown Detroit. He had it mapped out. Well, I'll go into the first floor, and I'll take out this guy at this desk, and then I'll go over to this corner because I know there's security there, and then I'm going to go up to this floor. And he had it outlined how he could single-handedly take over that building. Now, was the opportunity ever going to come up for him to take that building over? Probably not. It hasn't yet. I haven't heard anything about him trying. But he had a plan ready to go just in case the opportunity or the need ever arose. And here his brothers, Joseph's brothers, are here, and they see him coming. And it's not just something that popped into their head. It's like us, not just falling into sin. It's something that was in our head already. But here they see him, and now they've already had the plan. They've already had the thoughts. Now they finally have the opportunity. And again, it's like us. We think about things for a while, and then all of a sudden we have the opportunity. So that's where the real problem comes in, when we have the chance and we're not strong enough to say no. But here they had the opportunity, and they're ready to take advantage of it. So they're conspiring against it. And the problem here in 37:19, the problem with the brothers is right here. And they said one to another, behold, this dreamer cometh. Come now, therefore, and let us slay him, and cast him into some pit, and we will say, some evil beast hath devoured him, and we shall see what will become of his dreams. So they did a good job of, people talk about keeping the hope alive or keeping the love alive. Well, they did a good job of keeping the hate alive. I don't want to bring up any horrible Disney songs that stick in your head, that you hear 5,000 times in the shopping mall, but sometimes you just got to let stuff go. You got to let it go, and if there's an offense or if there's something that happens, sometimes you just got to leave it behind and let it go and forget about it, and they were not willing to do that. So they're mulling over and thinking over in their minds about Joseph and his relationship and his father and his dreams, and they are just going over it time and time again in their heads. They're not going to let it go. It is not helpful to them. Case, obviously. It is not good for them. And it's not good for us as, again, just practical things as a Christian. It's not good for us to mull those things over. Now, hopefully, I trust no one in here is like just waiting for the right opportunity to do in your spouse and make sure the life insurance is paid up and, conspiring against them and all that sort of thing. I don't think anybody here is at that level. If you are, I don't even want to hear about it. But there are people, and us, there are some times where something happens and we can't let it go. But it is not good for us to be rehashing something in our mind a year later, or 5 years later, or 10 years later, or 20 years later. I mean, it does not help us. It is not good for us to just go over the same offenses time after time after time and to keep that thing alive in our head. We just got to move on from things sometimes. Give it to the Lord, and if the person asks forgiveness and you got to decide whether to truly forgive them or not, that's another thing too. But just as far as dwelling on that thing, you just got to move on from that and go on and live your life for the Lord the best that you can. So there's times that it's not helping you to rehash it. And when you are rehashing it time after time and time, in your mind, you're rehashing it to your spouse or your kids or your friends or whoever you can get to listen to you. It's not good for you. It's not good for your family. It's not good for whatever other Christian brother or sister that you're rehashing it again to. It's not good for anybody. You got to let it go. So, but they haven't done that with Joseph. They don't even want to do that with Joseph. They just want to think about it and mull about it and stay mad about it and wait for the right opportunity, and here it is. So when we have that feeling, we got to fight against that. And then sort of conversely here, don't be surprised, for one thing, don't be surprised at your own abilities to do that once in a while, even without realizing it. And then on the other side, don't be surprised or too discouraged or frustrated if you find out that you've been on the end of someone's rehashing it over and over. Sometimes we do or say things without even realizing it, and it's taken the wrong way, or it's misunderstood, or something happens. We were trying to be funny and it fell flat and it was taken totally the wrong way. Sometimes that sort of thing happens. So just if you find out eventually that, this person has hated my guts for 5 years and I never even realized it, don't let it throw you for too big of a loop, because maybe it's a little bit your fault. It might not be your fault at all. Again, we got to go on at both ends and just serve the Lord. But as a Christian living in this world, there's going to be some time when either some Christian brother or sister, or definitely someone in the world, where they are not your friend. They don't want to be your friend. And matter of fact, they just want to think about how much they don't want to be your friend because of whatever it is in your life that they don't like. So just don't let that surprise you. Don't let it throw you for a loop. Don't let it discourage you. Just do the best you can, not to be offensive or, be a jerk for Jesus like they say, but just do the best you can and serve the Lord. But here Joseph, he had an issue with his brethren conspiring against him. And, of course, coming back to the type, just like Jesus Christ is here on this earth, his brethren, his Jewish brethren, are conspiring against him. The religious Jews are conspiring against him. And eventually, his Jewish kinfolk, his Jewish religious leaders, and eventually with Judas, they're successful. They conspire to slay Jesus, and they succeed. So that's another type of Joseph being similar to Jesus Christ. And here, of course, we've got a little bit cooler head down in chapter 37, verse 21. A little bit cooler. Reuben had his own issues too. But it says in verse 21, "And Reuben heard it, and he delivered him out of their hands, and said, Let us not kill him. And Reuben said unto them, Shed no blood, but cast him into this pit that is in the wilderness, and lay no hand upon him, that he might rid him out of their hands, to deliver him to his father again." So Reuben, he was not a perfect guy, and his dad spelled that out very clearly when he's giving his blessings to his sons there at the end. But Reuben at least had a cooler head here. There's no reason to kill this kid. Yeah, I don't like him either. There's things that I can't stand about him. I'd rather him not be around, but not to the point of slaying him. So he had a little bit more sense, and he had a good intention of getting him out and just sending him along home. That was Reuben's intention. But we know that didn't happen that way. So Reuben has this thought, he vocalizes it, and that's the problem a lot of times with me or with people in general, with Christians or even people in the world. We have an idea of what's right or wrong, and a lot of times we just don't vocalize it. We don't just say, what, that's not a good idea. You know what, I don't think you should be doing this. I mean, and it's not always that we're thinking, well, you know, you have to let the child lead, or, you know, you have to let people be free to follow their heart. I mean, we're not always thinking something silly like that, but sometimes we just don't want to step up and be the one to say, you know what, not a good idea. You shouldn't go this way. But here Reuben does that. But here we have, and I'm going to move quickly here. We've got just a couple more things to cover. Here that leads us up to verse 23. So Reuben says this thought, and he wanders off. He goes to get a Big Mac, or I don't know where he goes. He leaves the group. He leaves Joseph in this pit. It says, and it came to pass when Joseph was come unto his brethren that they stripped Joseph out of his coat of many colors that was on him, and they took him and cast him into a pit, and the pit was empty. There was no water in it. So here's type 18, just a strange similarity between Joseph and Jesus Christ. And it came to pass when Joseph was come unto his brethren that they stripped Joseph out of his coat of many colors that was on him. So it wasn't enough just to take Joseph and, say, you know what, Joseph, we've always hated your guts. We're always going to hate your guts, and we're going to throw you in this pit just to prove how much we hate you. Good luck climbing out. But it wasn't enough to do that. I mean, they had to strip him of his coat. Now, I don't think they had immediate plans here of, putting the blood on it and everything else. That wasn't the plan yet. The plan was, here's this kid. We think that he's proud. We think that he's a braggart. I mean, let alone the problems they had. I mean, they're the ones that had the evil report, and who knows what in the world they were going to Dothan for. I mean, what kind of perverted area or city it was that they wanted to travel there with these bunch of guys. But, hey, you know what? We hate this kid. Let's throw him in this pit, and on the way, we're going to humiliate him, strip off his clothes. And I think that's what was going on. They weren't taking the coat for part of the master plan yet. They were just humiliating him, and they were going to strip him and throw him into this pit, just, you could say, naked, just for the humiliation factor of him being their captive, and now they're going to do whatever they want to with him and shame him however they want to. And that's what went on with this. So they're going to get back at Joseph. They're going to get back at this good son that they couldn't stand. And of course, as we talked in our class, another type or an earlier type of Joseph and Jesus Christ was just the fact of Joseph having this special coat, this coat of many colors, just like Jesus had the coat that it talks about in the New Testament, woven from top to bottom, no seams in it. It was a special coat. And here Joseph is robbed of his coat, his garment, just like Jesus later on is robbed of his garment. Joseph is humiliated, he's stripped naked and thrown in this pit. And of course, Jesus Christ is stripped and humiliated and hung naked on that cross. So just another similarity there. So Joseph was stolen and, later on used as part of the plan to deceive their dad. And Jesus' coat was stolen from him and gambled away. It was a nice coat, so nice they didn't even want to rip it up for souvenirs. Somebody wanted that coat whole, and it was gambled away there. So type 18 there, the similarities between them. And then, of course, the verse that we read in verse 24, here Joseph is thrown into the pit. They took him in 24 and cast him into a pit. So he's placed under the ground again, as Jesus was placed under the ground in that tomb. And here he's cast into a pit. And it's specific here that it's an empty pit too. It's not like a well full of water. It's not the local swimming hole. I mean, it's a pit that he can't get out of. So anytime, or I won't say anytime, but a lot of times in the Bible, a pit is not a good thing to be associated with. A pit's not good. It's not anything that is usually productive or a good thing. I mean, people don't go into a pit on purpose. You catch things in in a pit. You have a tiger pit or a trap. You have here the pit that was just basically a trap for him, a holding cell for him. And then, of course, you have the bottomless pit, and you have things like that. But here you have this pit, and it's specific that it was water-free. Being cast, like it says, thrown into a pit with no water, that's not a soft landing. I mean, there's no trampoline or mattress at the bottom. So he's cast, and again, they don't care about him. Hey, the kid gets hurt, good, serves him right. They throw him into this pit. He lands hard on the bottom, and he's humiliated. He's in pain. He's scared, and we'll see here what happens next. Let's see down in verse 24. The pit was empty. There's no water in it, and they sat down to eat bread, and they lifted up their eyes and looked, and behold, a company of Ishmaelites. And we'll get to that later. These are not normal people here. I mean, we already knew that, right? These are not normal brothers. This is not a normal family. If you look at, let's see, Genesis 37, 42, I'm sorry. Genesis 42, just a few chapters over. I remember seeing like flannel graphs or, Sunday school pictures of Joseph in the pit. And, maybe his brothers are holding the coat of many colors at the top, with a wicked smile on their face. And Joseph's down in the pit, maybe like just, he looks serene because he's trusting his Lord and all that. He's trusting God, but he just looks like a regular boy that just happens to be standing in the bottom of a pit. But here in chapter 42, down in verse 20, here's his brothers later on before Joseph, who they have no idea who he is. But in verse 20, he's given them some stipulations for them to get more food and to save their lives. But bring your youngest brother unto me, so shall your words be verified, and ye shall not die. And they did so. And they said one to another, we are verily guilty concerning our brother. Now, they're talking about the brother who they don't even recognize here. But we are verily guilty concerning our brother, in that we saw the anguish of his soul when he besought us, and we would not hear. Therefore is this distress come upon us. And Reuben answered them, saying, spake I not unto you, saying, do not sin against a child, and ye would not hear? Therefore, behold, also his blood is required. So it wasn't just Joseph standing in the bottom of a pit saying, oh, okay, guys, come on, the joke's over. You're going to take me out now? Dad wants a report. He was down there. He was scared. He was naked, humiliated, crying, hurt. So it wasn't fun and games. It wasn't just a practical joke here for Joseph. And they knew that. They heard him. But here again, they hear all this. He's crying, bleeding, naked, whatever's going down there in the bottom of that pit. And they sat down to eat bread. This is not a normal person to hear the anguish, as they said later, of his soul, and you sit down and eat bread. That's not normal. That's not right. And Jesus, when he was humiliated and he suffered and he died on the cross, what did the religious guys all do after that? Well, it doesn't spell it out this way, but hey, you know what? Praise be to God, he's finally gone. Man, I'm starved. Let's go get something to eat. They just went on, and for what was normal for them, they went on and lived their normal life as they thought they were supposed to or able to do or got away with doing. So he's in anguish here. He's humiliated, broken, bleeding. Joseph is in the bottom of that pit, and they just go on like nothing's wrong. And that's exactly what happens with Jesus, with the religious crowd, with the Romans, and they just go on like life is good. These are not normal people. And that's where we're going to end today. But again, as just a final practical lesson, we are not in a normal world. So just don't forget that. We have periods of time where where things are going well, church is going well, our family's going well, work is going well. We're a nice guy, we're a nice gal. We really are not having a bunch of opposition or problems. Just remember, you're not in a normal world. There's going to be a time when someone's going to purposefully hurt you or oppose you or try to do something bad to you. And here I'm talking about the world toward Christianity or a Christian or you specifically. It's going to happen. You're going to have some bad opposition, and when you're hurt, your feelings are hurt, you're financially hurt, you're emotionally, whatever it is that they inflict on you, it's going to hurt and you're going to feel bad, but you know what they're going to do? They're just going to sit down and eat bread. They're going to go on like nothing's wrong. And what's more, they're going to have a better appetite because of what they were able to do with you and get away with. So just, again, we are not in a normal world. There will be times when it seems normal, but don't get discouraged. Don't get frustrated to the point that you say, I can't do it anymore. I'm a Christian, I'm trying my best, and then, I think things are going okay, I think I'm a nice guy, I think I'm a good testimony, I think I'm a good Christian, and then this and this and this and this happens. I don't know if I can do it anymore. Hey, that's normalcy in this world. It's normal to be opposed as a Christian. So it's going to be discouraging, it's going to be frustrating, but don't let it bring you to the point to where you quit. Here's Joseph. He's going through all this. He's going through all this that we're talking about right now. And what does he do after this? Well, we know the rest of the story without going into it. He's taken into Potiphar's house. He's framed by this whorish woman. He's thrown into jail. He sits in jail for years and years. Things aren't getting easier yet. But he just goes on and he does the best that he can serving the Lord. So, yeah, things are going to happen. Things are going to take place. Just don't let it surprise you. Don't let it discourage you to the point of quitting. And, ultimately, he's going to be delivered. It's a long way down the road for him from this point here. And we're going to be delivered from this. You're going through some hardship. You're going through some issue. The Lord's going to deliver you from it. The Lord's going to help you get through it, right? We know that as a Christian. It's going to happen. You're going to get through the problems. And, of course, what we're all waiting for is just in this wacky world, we're waiting for that final deliverance where the Lord comes back and delivers us out of here. So are there going to be some ups and downs before that happens? Yeah, there sure are. But just keep on going. Don't make it something that you're going to quit on your family or your church or the Lord over. Go on and just keep serving the Lord the best that you can. All right, well, we're going to end right there for today. And I see Brother Hicks wandered in the back there, so he's going to be our preacher this morning, and we'll talk about the things over there as far as helping him later. Take that out to his truck or trailer or whatever he has here. So we're really looking forward to hearing Brother Hicks